It was exactly 2 a.m. when I woke to a whisper slicing through the darkness. My daughter-in-law's voice, cold and deliberate, carried through the thin walls. "Tomorrow we'll send him to the nursing home. Everything is already arranged." My blood froze. In that instant I realized I was no longer a father in my son's home. I was a burden, a problem they wanted gone. I pressed my ear closer, hardly breathing as her words tightened around my chest like a noose. My son's silence on the other end confirmed the betrayal. My own family, the people I trusted the most, were plotting to discard me as if I were a broken chair. I grabbed my bag documents and the little dignity I still had left. Step by step, I slipped out the back door, the night air cold against my face. With each step, I promised myself one thing: I would never be anyone's victim again. By morning, they were in panic, searching for me. But it was too late. I was gone. What they never imagined was that I wasn't running away in fear. I was preparing for war. Do you want to know how a man they called old and useless turned betrayal into his greatest revenge? Stay with me, because this story will change the way you look at family forever. My name is Richard Miller. I'm 70, a retired Army sergeant who still folds his shirts like inspection day. After my wife Linda passed, I moved into my son David's place on the edge of Austin, telling myself it was temporary just until the ache dulled, and walking into an empty house didn't sound like a punishment. I kept busy mowing the lawn, fixing the hinge that squeaked, paying for more groceries than I ate. Pride fits awkwardly in a guest room. At 2 in the morning, the house had its own heartbeat, air vents humming, the refrigerator ticking. Over that small noise came a whisper that didn't belong to night. Victoria, in the kitchen, close enough to slice through drywall. "Tomorrow," she said, low and certain, "we'll put him in a nursing home. Everything's ready." Those words didn't float. They landed. I could feel them settle in my chest like stones. Training keeps you calm when the floor shifts. I didn't lunge for a light or make a sound. I slid my hand to the nightstand, found my phone, and opened the recorder. Texas is a one-party consent state. The fact arrived the way good habits do: quiet, useful. I angled the mic toward the air vent that carries kitchen conversations down the hall like a narrow river. A chair leg scraped tile. Victoria whispered again, clearer, as if she wanted the room to remember. "He won't fight it. He's tired. He'll sign." My jaw tightened so hard my molars complained. Tired, yes. Signing away myself, no. On the recording, my pulse made a small ocean noise. I pressed the phone closer and waited for a second voice. David's. A hesitant murmur, then a breath, then words too soft to commit to. That was my son kind when it cost nothing, silent when courage was required. I felt something I hate admitting: grief for a man still living. Footsteps slid along the hardwood. A strip of hallway light widened under my door. I stood and moved behind it, letting the door frame take my shadow. David's silhouette slowed by my room. The old floorboard near the linen closet begged to betray me. I lifted my feet and counted to 3. He kept walking. "Are you sure he asked from the kitchen?" Victoria's reply was a blade wrapped in velvet. "It's better for everyone. Better." There it was, the word people use when they make decisions for you and call it kindness. I ended the recording and saved it with the time burned in red, 2:06 a.m. Then I tapped to a new memo, kept my voice level, and spoke to the future. "My name is Richard Miller. I am of sound mind. I'm at my son's home in Travis County. I just overheard a plan to place me in a nursing facility tomorrow without my consent. I do not consent," I played it back. Steady, useful, a man speaking for himself. The house smelled faintly of coffee grounds and lemon cleaner. On another night, that would have been comfort. I pulled the accordion folder from the drawer copies of the trust and deed discharge papers. A list of bank contacts with a pen clipped on top. The shape of a life neat and portable. My fingers found Linda's ring on the chain around my neck. For a second, the cool metal steadied my breath. I whispered so only the ring could hear, "I'm still here." I eased the door open to the hallway. The nightlight threw a weak coin of gold on the floor. Far down in the dim kitchen, a phone screen winked out. I stepped around the betraying board, avoided the wobbly side table that rattles if you breathe on it, and paused at the corner. Victoria's mug left a wet circle on the counter. Her lipstick marked the rim in a careful half moon. Ordinary smug proof that tomorrow was organized. I looked at it until the image hardened into resolve. On the refrigerator was a little pad for grocery lists. Milk, eggs, dog treats. A life so sure of itself it forgot storms exist. I wrote 2 lines and slid the page beneath the fruit bowl. Not your burden, not your decision. The pen left a groove I could feel with my fingertip. It felt like spine. From the back door, the night waited, warm Austin air and the faint sound of a train. Taking its time somewhere east. My hand found the lock and turned it slowly, easing metal over metal so it wouldn't complain. Somewhere behind me, a hinge sighed, maybe David checking a bathroom, maybe the house settling. I stood still until the silence flattened, then cracked the door an inch and let the outside breathe in. I wasn't a father in that house anymore, just an object to be cleared out. They intended to move me by noon. I would be gone by dawn, with proof, with my name, with a plan. I lifted my bag, closed my fingers around the knob, and listened one last time for footsteps before stepping into the dark. I stepped into the night the way a diver slips beneath cold water, silent and committed. The back door closed behind me with a soft seal of weather strip and paint, and the yard smelled like warm cedar and cut grass. I kept to the shadow of the fence, crossed to the street, and raised a hand. A yellow cab rolled to a stop, dome light throwing a small square of mercy over the curb. "Downtown," I said, voice steady. "Any hotel with a staffed front desk." The driver glanced at me in the rear view, read the lines in my face, and nodded without questions. Austin at 2:30 a.m. is a city between selves. Neon flickered crosswalks counted to no one, and the capital's dome glowed like a patient moon. I opened my phone, switched to the front camera, and framed my shoulders and the bobbing constellation of city lights behind my head. "For the record, my name is Richard Miller," I said, clear and slow. "It's Tuesday, June 14th, 2:32 a.m. Central Time. I am alert and of sound mind. I am traveling independently to secure lodging downtown for my safety and dignity. If anyone claims otherwise, this recording will correct them." I rotated the screen to catch the dashboard clock and the cab's medallion. The driver raised 2 fingers in a half salute without taking his eyes off the road. The hotel rose out of Congress Avenue, glassy and self-assured. I asked the driver to wait a minute and carried my bag across the marble to the night desk. "Good morning, sir," said the clerk, a young man with a tie too tight for his neck. "How can I help you?" I set my ID on the counter, then my credit card with the edge of the name face up. "Richard Miller. I need a room for at least 3 nights. Please note in the folio that I am checking in personally and independently. I would appreciate a printed receipt at check-in with the timestamp." "Of course, Mr. Miller," he typed, eyes flicking between the screen and my face, something like respect, replacing the trained smile. I held my phone at chest level and recorded the desk clock, the stamp on the registration card, the pen in my hand as I signed my full name without a tremor. "Could you also do me one favor?" I asked, keeping my tone friendly but formal. "I may need to request lobby camera footage that shows my arrival and check-in. Would you please flag tonight's file and note that I've requested preservation?" The night manager stepped out from a back room, took in my posture, and said, "We can retain it for 30 days if you submit a written request." I smiled. "I'll submit it now." In the business center, I typed a short letter with the date and time requesting preservation of video covering the entrance, front desk, and elevator bank from 2:25 to 2:55 a.m. Signed it and handed it back at the desk. The clerk stamped it. Received, and made a copy with a neat thump of the machine. I slid both the receipt and the stamped letter into the accordion folder where they sat against the trust papers like new bones setting in an old body. In the elevator, the mirrored walls handed me an older man I recognized but hadn't properly met in a while. His shoulders were still square. His gaze didn't wobble. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, I walked to my room with the sure stride of someone who had just decided he would not be erased. Inside, I propped my phone on the ice bucket and recorded one more time the bedside clock glowing red behind my shoulder. "My name is Richard Miller. I secured lodging at my own expense. I requested camera preservation. I consent to nothing done in my name by anyone else." Only then did I sit on the edge of the bed and compose the message to Victoria. My thumbs hovered as the first bile-hot sentence formed. Then I deleted it. "Less is stronger. Don't look for me. We'll meet again in court." I watched the words sit there cool and tight and pressed send. The phone fluttered in my hand with the little whoosh that has ended marriages and started wars. For a coda, I dictated a line into my private notes, a promise I intended to keep. "If you want to bury me, I'll choose the grave for your reputation first." I laid out the contents of my bag on the desk with the precision of a kit inspection. Trust copy, deed copy, discharge papers, bank contacts, a laminated card with my blood type Linda insisted I keep years ago. One envelope, heavier than the rest, held a summary sheet I'd never shown David. In black print, clean and inarguable, was a clause that had kept me awake the night I signed it. The house my son lived in could be occupied by him at my discretion while I lived, but remained mine through the trust. I traced the paragraph with my finger as if reading Braille. The room seemed to tilt toward the page. Down on the street, a siren Dopplered past, then faded. My phone buzzed twice on the nightstand with Victoria's reply, then a third time with David's name. I let them buzz. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I hadn't used since Linda's funeral, a number that could turn paperwork into a blade. My thumb hovered over Benjamin Lawson, attorney, and the phone lit my face as I drew a breath and started to dial. Benjamin Lawson kept an office above a pawn shop and a coffee place that always smelled like burnt sugar. At 9 on the dot, I walked in with my bag and the night still in my bones. The receptionist took one look at the folder under my arm and ushered me down the hall without offering coffee. The door clicked shut behind me and Benjamin stood, sleeves rolled, a man who looked like he trusted paper more than promises. "Richard," he said, and the note of concern in my name told me I didn't need to waste time with pleasantries. I set the accordion folder on his desk and laid out my life like a field map. Copy of the Miller Family Trust, schedule a listing, the house on Willow Bend, title held through the trust with me as trustee and lifetime beneficiary. Deed copy, retirement accounts with current balances. Brokerage statements, rent rolls from 2 small properties I keep because roofs don't lie. He scanned quickly at first, then slowly, then stopped. "Your son's residence," he said, tapping the parcel number with his pen, "remains the trust's property during your lifetime. Occupancy at your discretion. I nodded. He never read the documents. He didn't want the responsibility that comes with knowing. Before he could ask, I pulled out my phone. I have something else. I played the recording from 2 a.m., the air vent whisper filling the room like a draft that carried winter with it. Tomorrow we'll put him in a nursing home. Everything's ready. Benjamin's eyebrows rose then lowered. He listened through the part where David murmured and where the word better cut like a clean blade. When it ended, he exhaled once deliberate. Texas. One-party consent. You're covered. We treat this as evidence of intent and coordination. He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. How do you want to proceed? I want to be very clear, I said. I'm not confused, incompetent, or lost. I checked into a hotel on my own. I requested preservation of their lobby footage. I have receipts time-stamped. They plan to move me like freight without my consent. We don't let that stand, good Benjamin said, already noting dates and times. We're going to do two things at once. First, the quiet road, a report to Adult Protective Services for suspected elder and financial exploitation submitted today with the audio and your documentation. A letter to your son and daughter-in-law, instructing them to cease any representation or arrangements and putting them on notice that no power of attorney exists. He tapped the trust, and a formal notice asserting your rights to the property and revoking permissive occupancy pending review. Second, the road with headlights. We plan a controlled public moment when it serves your case, not today, not out of anger, on our terms. The phrase road with headlights lit something in me I'd been tamping down since the kitchen. They wanted me small and out of sight. I intended to choose the stage. Benjamin kept talking crisp and calm. We'll also prepare to notify your bank and brokerage to flag any attempted inquiries that aren't you. And if we see signs of tax games in their filings, caregiver deductions, false medical expenses, we'll refer to the appropriate office. He stopped, studied my face. Some of this will take months. We do it right or we don't do it at all. Can you hold that line? I looked at the trust again, at the paragraph that had kept me company through more than one sleepless night. The house they called theirs was mine to allow and mine to revoke. My hand found the chain at my collar, Linda's ring cool against my knuckle. I straightened. I've led men into bad weather and brought them home. I said the words, leaving my mouth like they'd been waiting behind my teeth. I commanded soldiers at the front. Now it's time to command my own fate. Benjamin allowed himself half a smile. Then we start today. He drafted the APS report while I dictated the chronology, the whisper at 2, the words I recorded, the hallway light under my door, the hotel desk clock, the preserved footage. When he put the form in front of me, my signature sat under the statement, I am of sound mind, with a steadiness that made me proud. Next, he composed the cease and desist in the property notice, precise letters that did not shout, because they didn't need to. His printer grumbled them into the world, and I slid the warm pages into my folder like new armor plates. There's one more piece, he said, capping his pen. When the time is right, we'll stage a moment that leaves no oxygen for their story. You don't accuse, you demonstrate. You don't rant, you reveal. We choose the room and the audience. Until then, you say nothing to them beyond council-approved communication. Can you do that? I thought of Victoria's lipstick half-moon on the mug of David's silhouette. Pausing at my door, of the word better and what it really means when used by people who want your consent without your yes. I can do that. Benjamin slid a business card across the desk, a second number handwritten on the back. My cell. If anything shifts, call me day or night. I stood the bag lighter and my spine heavier. As I reached for the handle, my phone trembled with a new message from a number I didn't recognize. The preview line sat on the lock screen like bait. Mr. Miller, I have information about your daughter-in-law's finances and a plan she didn't tell your son. The text from the unknown number sat on my phone like a live wire as I left Benjamin's office. Information about Victoria's finances and a plan she hadn't told David. I didn't reply. Not yet. Revenge is a tool, not a reflex. We had work to do first, the kind that gives a story bones instead of bluster. By noon, Benjamin's paralegal had drafted 2 letters on firm letterhead, the kind that makes people sit up and read to the end. The first instructed Victoria and David to immediately cease any arrangements made or contemplated regarding my person, housing, or medical status. It reminded them that they did not and could not represent me in any capacity. The second was a formal notice that no power of attorney exists, that I have not authorized anyone to act on my behalf, and that any attempt to create or present such a document would constitute fraud. He read them aloud once more, ears tuned to tone as much as law, then slid them across the desk for my signature. We'll send by certified mail and email, he said. I want green cards back and read receipts blinking on their screens. I called the hotel desk and confirmed the lobby footage was flagged. Then I sat with the APS intake specialist on speaker while Benjamin took notes. The investigator's voice was the opposite of pity-steady procedural. The kind you want when a house is on fire, but the water has to arrive through a hydrant. I recited the timeline from 2 in the morning forward, and when we reached the part about the recording, she asked if I could provide a copy and a sworn statement. I can and I will. She assigned a case number and warned me what other people forget to say out loud. This may take 3 to 6 months. We collect voicemail, talk to neighbors, review camera footage, verify your functional status. We don't rush truth. I thanked her anyway. A slow clock is still a clock. Benjamin had another stack ready by the time I hung up. Bank and brokerage notification letters instructing them to flag my accounts for unusual inquiries and to require in-person verification for any changes. A draft IRS form, 3949, a paperclip to a checklist with a neat column labeled potential caregiver deductions, false medical expenses, misrepresented dependency. We won't file that yet, he said. We wait to see if the pattern emerges, but we'll be ready. He held my gaze to make sure readiness didn't get mistaken for bluster. In my life, readiness had kept men alive. I recognized it on him instantly. By late afternoon, the certified envelopes were on their way, and the emails chimed, sent with a weight that felt like metal settling into place. I kept my phone face down on the desk and listened to the room printer, cooling hallway footsteps, the distant hiss of espresso steaming milk below us. Each small sound felt like an honest thing. Victoria's plan was the opposite of honest. It was efficient, polished, and cold. It called cruelty better and theft caregiving. At 3:30, the APS investigator called back with a practical request. Mr. Miller, would you be willing to complete a brief cognitive screening at your convenience on the record? People lie about competence all the time. People also lie about incompetence. The smallest laugh escaped me. I'll bring my reading glasses and my patience. She scheduled me for Friday, then added, if anyone attempts to contact you to influence your report, let me know. We keep those messages. Evidence breathes longer than outrage. Benjamin printed final copies of the letters for my file. Sign here, initial here. He watched my hand move steady, no tremor, as if the ink itself were part of the argument. When we finished, he leaned back and steepled his fingers. This is the part where they either back down quietly or make mistakes we can measure. You don't reach out. You don't explain yourself. If they call, it goes to counsel. He paused, then gave me something I could put in my pocket. Remember what we said. 2 lanes. Quiet law and bright light. We'll decide when to switch on the high beams. On my way out, I stood by the window that looked over the pawn shop's neon pistol and the coffee shop's line of college kids cramming for futures they couldn't picture yet. I could feel the pull to text that unknown number to grab whatever rope they were throwing me. Instead, I walked to the corner mailbox and slid in a letter of my own. A handwritten request to the hotel's security office to preserve footage from the elevator bank as well as the lobby. Belt and suspenders. Then I called the APS case number and left a short message noting that Victoria and David had been formally notified to stand down and that I would forward any responses or voicemails without reply. Back at the hotel, the room smelled like new carpet and air conditioning, the kind of neutral that lets a man think. My phone lit with 3 messages stacked like birds on a wire. The first was from David, a tight paragraph about misunderstanding and love and doing what's best. The second was from Victoria, 6 words that treated me like a problem ticket. Please call. We can discuss options. The third came from an address I didn't recognize with a subject line that knew exactly where to aim. Draft POA. Notarization pending. You should see this. The penthouse was the kind of place that held its breath until you told it what kind of man you were. 12th floor corner unit concrete ceilings, a window that cut the skyline into manageable pieces. I dropped my bag on the console table, set the accordion folder beside it like a flag, and stood at the glass until the city steadied in my chest. Far below Austin moved in small, precise gestures. A bus exhaled at the curb, a runner crossed on the changing light, a barback hosed down a sidewalk that had seen more confessions than most churches. This would do. A man doesn't hide in a room like this. A man stages from it. I cleared the kitchen island the way I used to clear a workbench, everything in its place and only what mattered left visible. I propped my phone against a water glass, framed the clock on the oven behind me, and hit record. Richard Miller. I said, eyes level. Wednesday, 0700 hours Central Time. I woke, ate, and showered without assistance. I am oriented to person, place, and time. I have secured my own lodging. I consent to nothing arranged by others. I panned to the stamped hotel folio, then back to my face. An old lion still roars. I saved the file with the time in the name and watched the red dot disappear. Evidence breathes longer than rumor if you feed it oxygen. The gym opened at 6. I traded the elevator's hush for the clink of plates and rubber on steel. No heroic nonsense form over pride, breath over ego. Rowing machines slow and clean. Farmer's carry to remind my hands they still belong to my arms. A trainer with a sleeve of tattoos glanced over with the quick scan that decides whether to help or to sell. He picked a towel off the floor and nodded once, the small salute of one worker to another. I lifted, stretched, wrote the numbers in a notebook. Not for vanity, for record. A man the world calls confused does not track progress to the pound and the minute. Back upstairs, I shaved with the care of a man who intends to be seen. The mirror returned a jawline that had been hiding under grief. I buttoned a crisp Oxford and left the collar open, then called a tailor I hadn't visited since Linda's last Christmas party. He answered like no time had passed. Mr. Miller, I have your pattern. By noon, I stood on a small wooden box while he circled me with chalk. 2 suits, I said, 1 navy, 1 charcoal. American shoulders, quiet cloth. I want to look like a man the world takes seriously even before I speak. He pinned the cuff, stepped back, and smiled the way craftsmen do when they know they can help. You already do. In the cab to the VFW post off Burnett, I recorded another journal entry, the timestamp clear on the dash clock. 0940, en route to speak with fellow veterans. Purpose: community verification of function, support, and witness. The post smelled like coffee that had been waiting since 6 and old wood polish. Photos lined the wall. Young faces set like they couldn't imagine ever being anything else. A commander in a clean polo stuck out his hand. "Sergeant Miller, heard you were coming." He listened without interrupting as I sketched the shape of the last 48 hours. When I finished, he tapped the desk with 2 fingers the way men do when they've reached a decision. "Here's what we can do. We document. If APS or anyone else wants to know whether you're functioning, they can ask us. We'll be there if you need a statement. We don't let one of ours get pushed around." He had the adjutant snap a photo of us with the day's paper in the frame, the date fat and undeniable. It wasn't for Facebook. It was for the file. We walked the length of the hall together while he introduced me to the men and women I'd sit beside if this turned into a longer fight. Each handshake wrote a line under the idea that I was not alone. "We've seen this," one Vietnam vet said softly as he passed me a styrofoam cup. "Kids think care means control. It doesn't." I didn't trust my voice, so I squeezed his shoulder and he understood. On the way out, I stopped at a neighboring American Legion post, left my name, and arranged a Saturday morning visit. 2 communities, 2 sets of eyes, 2 numbers I could hand to any investigator who wanted proof that I was living in the world, not drifting over it. Outside, the Texas sun laid a clean line down the sidewalk and the wind smelled faintly of cut hay. I stood for a moment in that ordinary blessing and let it wash away the kitchen whisper that had started this. Back at the penthouse, the tailor called. "First fitting tomorrow, Mr. Miller. We'll finish the Navy by Friday." I filmed a 3rd entry as the afternoon bent toward evening. 1,600 hours. Completed physical training community engagements at VFW and AL. Cognition intact, mood steady, purpose clear. I held Linda's ring up to the lens for a second, then let it drop back against my sternum. The chain made the smallest sound, like a clock restarting. The phone vibrated with a new email from the VFW commander, a draft statement on letterhead that read like a promise. "The post affirms that Sergeant Richard Miller Ritchie is known to us functioning independently and an active participant in today's activities." He'd attached a photo of us with the date and a line offering to attend any hearing to affirm the same. I printed it on the penthouse's little desk printer and slid it behind the trust copies. The folder was beginning to feel like armor. Dinner was salmon and green beans I cooked myself, seasoned from memory the way Linda taught me. Too little salt is just as disrespectful as too much. I ate at the counter with the window open a crack so the city could keep me company. When the dishes were dry and the sky took on the deep blue that makes a man honest, I pressed record one more time. 1930. End of day status strong. Tomorrow suit fitting, APS screening bank follow-up. Strategy remains unchanged. We fight on paper until the paper becomes steel. The text tone cut across my last word. B. Victoria, 3 messages in a row, each more clipped than the last. "We need to talk. This isn't what you think. David is worried sick." Then a 4th from a number I didn't recognize with a link, and a line that curled at the edges like heat. "Missing elderly alert. Have you seen this man?" I tapped the preview and froze at the photo that filled my screen. Me taken from a holiday last year under a headline that turned my blood to wire. They were going to paint me lost so they could claim me out of the world. I looked down at the VFW statement on the counter, then back at the glowing lie in my hand, and felt something old and exact settle into place. Tomorrow, before the sun cleared the buildings, I would answer both. By morning, the lie had legs. The missing elderly post that flashed on my phone the night before was already circulating in the neighborhood app, through a cousin's Facebook, and God help us on the church prayer chain. Neighbors I'd waved to for years were now commenting with hearts and candles under a photo from last Christmas, as if grief were a fact to be crowdsourced. Victoria had written the caption herself in that careful public voice of hers. "Richard's been confused lately. We're terrified he wandered off. Please keep an eye out." She'd attached David's number and asked for a welfare check. The call came from a non-emergency line with an Austin Police Department ID. "Sir, this is Officer Green. We've received a request for a welfare check. Are you safe right now?" I stood by the penthouse window and watched a delivery truck back into an alley in 3 clean tries. "I am safe, officer. I am at a hotel downtown alone of my own free will. I am oriented to person, place, and time. I am not missing, nor am I confused." He kept his tone even and asked 2 more questions that told me he'd done this before. "Do you feel threatened by anyone? Do you consent to your location being shared?" "No to both," I said, "but I do ask that you note in your report that false claims regarding my capacity have been made and that I have counsel." He read the case number back to me and I repeated it slow. "Evidence prefers the patient." I hung up and opened a new email to family names who'd been pulled into concern. BCC, a longer list: Benjamin, the VFW commander. The APS investigator's intake address: 2 neighbors I trusted to read twice before sharing once. Subject line: I am safe. Body: I am free, not missing. I am of sound mind and have chosen to leave David's residence temporarily. Do not file or amplify false reports concerning my capacity or whereabouts. Any contact regarding my welfare or property must go through my attorney. I pasted the APS case number, attached the VFW statement, and a photo taken moments before with the date on the day's paper. Then I sent it and felt the room exhale. Within an hour, my voicemail badge added a red bead with every new worried message. A neighbor's voice, warm and earnest: "Richard, call me, please. I don't believe what they're saying." A cousin, apologetic: "I'm so sorry, I didn't know what to do but share." Then Victoria, the edges fraying off her tone. "Richard, it's Victoria. Please call me back immediately. We're coordinating with authorities and a facility, a care option. We need to resolve this today." The word she'd almost used hung between syllables like a loose tooth. I saved each clip labeled, time-stamped, put them in the same folder as the lobby footage request and the VFW letter. Around noon, my phone vibrated again with Victoria's number, then stopped. 30 seconds later, a new voicemail appeared, longer than the others. I pressed play and listened to panic make people careless. "Okay," she hissed to someone beside her. "This is ridiculous. If he shows up, we just take him to the tour tomorrow and have the director talk sense into him." "David, I can't keep rescheduling this. Tomorrow. The nursing home tour is tomorrow." She must have thought she'd hung up. The rest was shuffling and a muffled curse before the beep cut her off. I replayed it then once more, hearing the scrape of truth under her words. The welfare check. The public lament the candles and hearts. Meanwhile, the tour tomorrow was already on the calendar. I forwarded the voicemail to Benjamin with a single line: "Here's the mask slipping." He replied 3 minutes later: "Perfect. Keep it preserved. Do not reply." I sent a copy to the APS investigator with the note that their narrative and their scheduling were out of tune. Then I recorded my own entry voice, steady as a range order. 2:13 p.m. received voicemail from daughter-in-law referencing a nursing home tour tomorrow. Saved and forwarded. The truth is a medicine they can't swallow. That afternoon, David called twice more, and when I didn't pick up, he texted, "Dad, this is spiraling. Please meet us halfway. She's trying to help." I stared at the word help until it resolved into its real shape: control. I typed a response for 10 minutes and then deleted it, hearing Benjamin's counsel in my head. quiet law, bright light. Not yet. Just before dusk, the APS investigator left a message confirming my cognitive screening time for Friday morning and reminding me to bring ID. She added almost conversational that she'd logged notes about the online posts and voicemails and that she had requested copies of any non-emergency call logs tied to my name. Bureaucracy can feel like molasses until the day it feels like ballast. I thanked her out loud to an empty room and meant it. When the sky outside the window turned that particular Texas blue that hovers between evening and night, my phone chirped with a new text from the same unknown number that had dangled bait outside Benjamin's office. Thought you'd want to see this. The photo loaded slowly top to bottom hotel bar, lighting two silhouettes too familiar to mistake leaning close over a corner table as if the room were theirs. Victoria's profile unmistakable even in half light. The man facing her lifted his glass and smiled, and the floor of the evening shifted under my feet. It wasn't my son. The photo on my phone finished rendering line by line until the face across from Victoria snapped into focus. Ethan. My son-in-law. He wasn't supposed to be in that picture, in that bar, in that hour, leaning in like a partner. By the time I reached Benjamin's office, the anger had cooled to something sharper than heat. He listened, then dialed his investigator and rattled off a short list: preserve the bar's camera footage, pull credit card slips for last night, scrape public records for any notary appointments tied to my name. He sent a preservation letter to the bar manager within the hour, and another to the payment processor. Paper moves slow until someone with a letterhead asks it to move fast. By late afternoon, the investigator sent back grainy stills from the bar's ceiling cam and a neat summary. 17 p.m. 2 martinis and a club soda on a tab paid with a card ending 2274, name Ethan Carter. Email receipts matched the timestamp. An automatic calendar item on Victoria's account read, estate planning chat. A second thread arrived half an hour later, screenshots from a Gmail draft folder, subject line authorization paperwork, with language that made my skin crawl. Proposed durable POA for Richard M. Finance Healthcare Combined. Notary pending. Ethan had sent her a template. Victoria added notes: once signed, we can consolidate and adjust his portfolio, shift recurring payments, streamline. Streamline is what you call theft when you want to sleep at night. Benjamin didn't raise his voice. He underlined dates with the tip of his pen and built a sequence that a judge could understand. He added a second column labeled David and penciled in transactions from the last month where Victoria had moved money between their joint accounts, just small enough to hide, just large enough to matter. If the POA had landed, she'd have had access to my accounts too, and David would have been the last to know whose name funded his life. While we were assembling the spine of their plan, the story broke open from inside the house I'd left. Emily stopped by to collect a box of winter clothes from the hall closet and heard the printer spitting paper in the office. She told me later it was the sound that saved us, the flat whir of a machine still warm. On the tray lay a fresh scanned durable power of attorney for Richard Miller. My name pre-filled. A signature box with my name typed in a script font meant to pass at a glance. A notary line empty waiting. At the bottom, a watermark from a template site that screamed lazy to anyone who's ever signed a real form. She took photos. She checked the printer's memory and found the same file saved as scan001.pdf with a timestamp from that morning. She forwarded everything to me and to Benjamin, then walked into the kitchen with the page in her hand. Victoria looked up from her phone and went pale in a way makeup can't hide. David stood by the sink, pretending the faucet needed his full attention. Emily didn't raise her voice. She laid the paper on the island and tapped the typed version of my name with her fingernail. You didn't just betray my father, you betrayed this entire family. Victoria blinked, then reached for the nearest weapon available to coward's blame with a smile. David wanted this, she said, and the ease with which the sentence left her mouth told me she'd practiced it in mirrors. He's worried about your dad's safety. He asked me to look into options. I never would have done any of this if he hadn't pushed. David flinched like a man who'd been handed a live grenade and told it was a peach. Emily turned to her brother, eyes steady. Tell me you didn't know about this. David opened and closed his mouth twice, then managed a half sentence that felt like a plea with nowhere to land. I thought we were just exploring paperwork. Emily gathered the pages, slipped them into a manila envelope, and took one more photo of the printer's display showing today's date. Victoria reached to grab the envelope, and Emily stepped back so cleanly it felt rehearsed. I'm sending this to Dad and to his attorney, she said. If you try to print another copy, I'll come back with the police. Victoria's eyes hardened. You'll blow up your own family. Emily didn't blink. You already did that. She drove straight to Benjamin's office and placed the envelope on his desk without sitting. He scanned the form the way a surgeon studies an X-ray before telling the patient there's work to be done. He nodded at the watermark, the empty notary line, and the script font that didn't match my signature on any other document. This doesn't just look bad, he said. It reads like intent. Emily's face trembled at the mouth and then steadied. She looked at me. I'm not losing you because they're greedy. Benjamin capped his pen and gave us the shape of what came next. We would add the scan to the APS file and prepare an emergency motion if they attempted to present any version of it. We would notify the notary registry to flag my name. And we would pick our room and our crowd for the moment when the light would do the most good. Not yet, he said. Soon. People who lie count on silence. We'll give them an audience. Emily stood the envelope under her arm like a shield. Tell me where to be and when, Dad. I'll stand there. I looked at the bar, still on my phone, at Ethan's smile caught mid-toast, and felt the clean hunger of justice rise like a tide. Benjamin slid a card across the desk with a date and time penciled on the back. Saturday. A charity luncheon. Microphones are already tested. If they bring their story, we'll bring the recording. Saturday came dressed like a promise. The charity gala for senior housing and community grants filled the downtown ballroom with small talk and good intentions. The clink of glassware stitching together a room full of people who believed daylight could correct what shadows spoil. My name sat on the sponsor board near the entrance, Richard Miller, benefactor, in a typeface that said quiet money. I shook hands, signed a card for the auction, and let the hum of the crowd gather around me, until the MC tapped the mic and the house lights dimmed. When they called me up, I walked to the podium in the navy suit that fit like a decision. Good evening, I said, letting my voice fill the corners. I'm Richard Miller. Tonight I'm committing funds to expand independent living units right here in Austin. Applause lifted and fell. I held up a palm. But I didn't come only to write a check. I came to tell you a story about a father. I didn't use names. I didn't need them. He lived with his adult child and that child's spouse. One night, 2 a.m, he overheard a plan to move him to a nursing facility without his consent. Not a conversation. A plan, with paperwork ready by noon. A murmur threaded the room. The screens on either side of the stage lit up with a simple slide, 2:07 a.m., red digits above a waveform. Texas is a one-party consent state, I said evenly. He recorded what he heard through the vent. We've masked names and replaced them with tones to respect privacy and the law. Please listen. The clip played the low hum of a sleeping house. Then a woman's whisper modulated only enough to keep it legal. Tomorrow we'll put him in a nursing home. Everything is ready. The timestamp sat in the corner like a truth you couldn't talk over. Conversations in the room stalled mid-breath. Somewhere a fork met china and stayed there, before any throat could clear a rebuttal that didn't exist. The next slide appeared a hotel front desk clock, the registration card, my signature steady and legible. The video rolled for 10 seconds, me checking in. No coaching, no escort, no confusion. Then a scan of the receipt with the night manager's stamp. This father, I said, secured his own lodging. He requested lobby footage preservation. He notified authorities that he was safe-oriented and acting independently. He did not consent to be relocated. On cue, the live camera operator paid by the event, credentialed by the local station, panned across the audience to catch reactions. That wide, obliging sweep happened to take in a table near the back where my son and his wife had planted themselves like they'd shown up to win a raffle. David froze the way men do when they recognize the tide is not theirs. Beside him, Victoria's color drained to a museum white. The screen returned to me as murmurs swelled disbelief anger. The fine crackle that runs through a room when people realize a private cruelty has costumed itself as care. I let the noise crest and then spoke into it, not louder but firmer. Is this the man you planned to push into a place of strangers? The sentence hung in the air like a bell tone. I didn't point. I didn't name. I didn't need to. The story had its own geometry. Every listener knew where the lines met. Here's what matters. I continued, and the next slide showed my VFW statement on letterhead, the date large as daylight. Competence is not a thing to be voted on by relatives feeling impatient. Independence is not a door you quietly lock behind an elder because the hinges squeak. I took a breath, and the suit held me like armor. Tonight I'm adding $200,000 to the fund for independent living units with priority placement for seniors resisting coercive placement. And I invite every person here to remember consent is not a courtesy, it's the law. Applause started in one corner and spread, first polite, then forceful. The sound people make when they realize they can sign their names to something bigger than a check. The MC took a step toward me, eyes bright with the thrill of a segment that writes itself. A local reporter angled near the stage, her camera light blooming like a small sun. At the back, a volunteer opened the doors for more air and caught on reflex a shot of David rising halfway from his chair before sitting again as if the idea couldn't hold its own weight. Victoria stared at the floor like it might volunteer an alibi. I thanked the room and left the podium to a small forest of hands. On the screen behind me, the final slide settled in a simple email address for the foundation office we'd stood up that morning and a line that read, "We help you keep your say." My phone buzzed as I stepped off the riser. First from Benjamin, well executed. Do not engage. Then from an unknown number, I'd learned to respect local stations want a pull quote. Also check the parking garage cam feed. Someone's about to run before the credits roll. The tip about the parking garage was right. Security pulled a clip of Victoria hustling to her SUV with her purse clutched like contraband, David half a step behind. The kind of couple who knows the story is no longer theirs to tell. By sunrise, the gala had become a headline. Local stations cut the clip of my 2 a.m. recording into their morning shows, and the news anchors spoke in the careful tones people reserve for a wrongdoing that hides behind family titles. The VFW Post and the American Legion issued statements before noon. We do not abandon veterans. We stand with Sergeant Richard Miller Redden in his right to self-determination. Phones at Benjamin's office rang hard enough to rattle the glass reporters. Advocates, a church group offering to bring casseroles to strangers like courage, arrives in foil. I said yes to one interview, a sit-down on a local talk show, where the host let the silence earn its keep. I told the story the way I'd told it to the room, no names, no slander, only facts and timestamps. When she asked what I wanted, I said what I meant. I want my say. I want the law to treat coercion in a house the way it treats it in a stranger's van. I want a little fear put into people who confuse convenience with care. The camera light clicked off and the producer handed me a card from a man who'd been watching from the back row. Investigative journalist, Stephen Clark. He said my name quietly as if it were a paper he'd already read twice. There's more, Mr. Miller. May we talk privately? We met in the studio's green room, the kind with furniture that pretends to be softer than it is. Stephen laid a folder on the coffee table and didn't push it toward me. He just rested his fingertips on the manila and said, "What I'm about to tell you will hurt, but it will also make the present make sense." I told him to go on. He slid out a timeline and 3 documents. Years ago, before Linda passed, he said carefully, there were text messages between her and Ethan, then just Emily's fiancé. Lunches in the middle of the week. 2 nights at a motel off IH-35 booked under initials that match their names. A printed photo from a backup cloud account, Linda in a scarf I'd given her, taken at a distance through a cafe window. The date on the corner felt obscene, as if the number itself were public indecency. I didn't move. Something inside me did, like a ship taking on water, quiet, grim, inevitable. Stephen kept his voice low. I found this because I went looking for the lever Victoria had on Ethan. She knew. Old emails in a deleted folder on her account, screenshots of the texts. A note to herself, keep this safe. He flipped the page. When she wanted him to help with the power of attorney scheme, she had the kind of pressure a decent man can't breathe under. That's why he was in the bar with her. That's why he sent templates. That's why he's been nodding along to her plan while your son stood there confused, thinking he was being a good husband. I touched the photograph lightly, then withdrew my hand. As if paper could burn. In the hall, I could hear a receptionist laugh at something that didn't matter. Clayton Christensen once wrote that the dearest things we lose are lost an inch at a time. Mine was humming as it went. Stephen wasn't done. Emily needs to know, he said. I'll publish only what you allow, but the mechanism matters if we're going to explain motive without looking like we invented a soap opera. Emily arrived within the hour, her eyes already asking the question before I said her name. I handed her the timeline and braced for the sound of a heart breaking under its own logic. She didn't cry at first. She went very still. Then she put her fist to her mouth, a small animal sound pressed back by will. My mother, she said, and my husband. Her voice cracked on husband like the word had failed to pay rent. Stephen told her what he told me, that the past was leverage, not license, that the point now was to stop the financial exploitation in the present. She looked at me, not him. What do we do? We do not try this in the court of public grief, I said. We try it where evidence lives. I will not drag your mother's coffin back into the street so someone else can sell tickets. I punish the living who harm my family, not slander the dead. The sentence surprised me with how quickly it arrived and how completely it settled the air. Emily nodded once, fierce. Then make them answer for what they're doing now. Benjamin agreed. We would use the affair as context only if it became necessary to explain the conspiracy between Victoria and Ethan in a venue that demanded motive. Otherwise, our filings would remain what they already were. Tight, clean, present tense. We added a line to the motion noting a suspected coercive relationship between 2 parties seeking to obtain control of my assets backed by communications logs, but without naming the dead or parading the shame of the living. Stephen promised to sit on the older material until we told him otherwise. He put the folder back together with the care of a man packing a wound. By evening, the VFW's statement had gone national, shared by larger veterans groups who recognized the shape of this fight. The inbox filled with strangers writing their own versions of my night moms moved without consent. Dads gaslit into signing. A retired nurse offered to testify about facilities that love a warm bed more than a warm body. The pressure climbed. So did the stakes. At 9 p.m., David finally called and left a message that sounded like a man standing on a dock watching the boat he'd chosen pull away. Dad, things are happening fast. Victoria's been asked to take leave. Ethan's firm is reviewing something. My company wants a statement. Can we please meet? I pressed save, set the phone face down, and stared at the ceiling until the plaster lines became a map of roads I could still choose. In the morning, a different kind of knock would come, not from a reporter but from consequence, and I intended to be the one opening the door. By morning, consequence had a schedule. HR letters always sound polite when they swing a hammer. Victoria's came first, an email marked administrative leave pending investigation, copied to legal, written in that office dialect that pretends mercy while measuring liability. She forwarded it to David with a single sentence. They can't do this, and then sent me a text 5 minutes later that read like a dare, are you satisfied now? I didn't answer. Satisfaction wasn't the point, accountability was. Ethan's reckoning arrived in invoices. A healthcare client terminated his consulting contract for cause after the charity clip ran, and a reporter called to ask about his role in elder placement. The firm posted a neutral statement about values and ethics, the kind that says nothing and everything. His LinkedIn went quiet. The smile in that bar photo looked suddenly like a man who didn't know how fast a floor can give way. In our neighborhood, reputations moved more quickly than trash day. The HOA thread that once traded lawn tips now traded side-eyes. A woman who had pressed a casserole into my hands after Linda's funeral posted praying for everyone involved, and then to her credit deleted it after she watched the segment with the timestamp. On Sunday, David and Victoria slid into the third pew from the back at church and sat so still you could hear the page turns. No one shunned them. No one embraced them either. Afterwards, the pastor shook David's hand and then rested his palm on my shoulder with a pressure that said he'd seen worse and better and knew which this was. David came to the penthouse that afternoon with the posture of a boy who'd stayed out past the streetlights. He didn't text ahead. He just stood at the door, eyes rimmed in red, clutching a duffel that had seen better trips. I let him in and didn't offer coffee. He looked around the room like it might offer another father one softer. Dad, he said finally, voice cracking where pride had been. They've suspended Victoria. Ethan lost a contract. People at work keep their headsets on when I walk by. The neighbors look through me. I chose the wrong family. The sentence collapsed at the end and he did too into a chair. Shoulders shaking with a grief that belonged to a man and a boy at once. I sat across from him and let the silence clear a space big enough for truth. You had a home, I said when my own voice was steady. You burned it yourself. He flinched as if the words had weight, then nodded like maybe he deserved to be hit by something that wasn't a lie. Please, he said, wiping his face with the heel of his hand. Can I stay here a few nights? I'll pay you back. I can't be there right now. Everything in me wanted to say yes the way fathers do when their sons are bleeding. But love isn't the same thing as rescue, not when rescue would teach the wrong lesson. No, I said, and the word felt like medicine I hated but would take anyway. Not until you start fixing the part of you that let this happen. He looked up, hurt blooming into anger and then dissolving back into shame. How, he whispered. Where do I even start? Therapy, I said, with someone who knows what enmeshment looks like. Family sessions with Emily if she agrees. Individual sessions for you. You will sit in a room and say out loud what you let happen to your father in your house. Then you will learn how to be a husband and a brother worth a roof. He swallowed hard. And Victoria. I shook my head. Not my project. If she wants help, she can ask God and a lawyer in that order. He stood and shouldered the duffel like it weighed his whole history. At the door, he turned back, eyes raw but clearer than I'd seen them in months. If I do the work, will there be a place for me again? I didn't promise what I couldn't guarantee. There will be a door, I said. Whether you can walk through it depends on the man you bring to the threshold. He left without slamming anything which felt new. I watched him cross the lobby on the security monitor. The building feeds to tenants grateful for the fact of cameras that remember what people forget. My phone buzzed before the elevator doors closed. Benjamin. Court set a hearing on our emergency motion, he said, voice clipped and calm. We've been assigned a judge who takes APS referrals seriously. Also, the clerk confirms a notary recorded an attempt to schedule a POA signing in your name for Friday canceled this morning. We'll want that record. I told him I'd be there in a suit that meant business. When I hung up, a new message blinked onto the screen. No name, just a file icon and 6 words that lengthened the shadows in the room. From Ethan's work email. You'll want this. The courthouse smelled like old varnish and winter coats. We were on the civil docket first, a motion hour thick with family names and thin alibis. Benjamin slid our exhibits into place with a tactician's calm. Exhibit A, the 2 a.m. recording. Exhibit B, the durable power of attorney template with my name pre-filled. Exhibit C, the hotel check-in footage and stamped receipt. Exhibit D, email and conversation logs. Exhibit E, Emily's photos of the printer tray and the scanned timestamp. When the clerk called our case, the courtroom settled into that listening posture people wear when they expect someone to lie and hope someone else is ready for it. The judge, a woman with steel in her posture and mercy in her diction, read our motion for injunctive relief, then looked over her glasses at counsel for the other side. Counsel nodded at Victoria and David as if to say, this won't hurt if it's quick. It didn't look quick. Benjamin called me first. I swore and named myself, my age, my service, and the shape of the last weeks. He played 30 seconds of the recording, enough for the plan to leave the vent and land in the room. The timestamp glowed on the screen like a brand. He followed with 10 seconds of the hotel footage, my signature clear. My voice steady, the desk clock visible. No commentary, just facts. Emily took the stand next. She spoke like a nurse, checking a pulse, calm, precise, no room for fantasy. She described hearing the printer, finding the fresh scan, seeing my name in the signature box in a script font that matched nothing else in my life. She held up the photo with the printer's display and the day's date. The judge asked 2 questions. Did your father authorize you or anyone to draft a power of attorney? No. Did you confront the respondent about the document? Yes. What was the response? Blame. Then the APS investigator testified by video. She summarized the intake, the cognitive screening I completed, the preservation of voicemails and online posts, the welfare check call, where I declined to share my location and affirmed competence. Her last line was as flat as a hammer face. The agency substantiates concerns of attempted coercion and potential financial exploitation. When it was their turn, the defense tried to dress control as concern. Victoria kept her eyes trained on a safe point on the back wall and spoke about love in the dialect of paperwork. We were researching care options. He's been tired. He forgets appointments. The judge held up a hand. We are not here to litigate the universal experience of fatigue, Ms. Miller. We are here about consent and documents. Under cross, Benjamin moved to the POA. Who drafted this? Silence stretched thin. Did you send an email titled authorization paperwork with my client's name on a template? She flinched. I was compiling information, and who purchased drinks at the Green Finch bar while discussing that template. He clicked to the tab receipt. Ethan Carter, she said finally, as if the syllables weighed more coming out than going in. They called Ethan, and you could feel the room brace. He looked like a man who had tried to thread a needle with a hurricane. He cleared his throat and began with the line men use when they regret the wrong thing. I didn't want to be here. Benjamin didn't make him. The defense did. Did Ms. Miller ask you to help her prepare a power of attorney for Mr. Miller? Yes. Did she pressure you with personal history? If you declined. He stared at the table. Yes. Did your coordination include a plan to streamline Mr. Miller's accounts once the document was signed? His voice went small. Yes. The judge's pen stopped. She looked at Victoria the way surgeons look at an X-ray when the shadow isn't ambiguous. Counsel for the respondents stood to object on tone and implication. The judge overruled without looking away. Benjamin closed the loop with a final sequence, the voicemail where a tour tomorrow slipped out. The certified letters noting no power of attorney. The bank alerts. The VFW statement verifying my function. The story aligned like track being laid under a moving train. The ruling came in a voice that belonged to the bench, not the news. Injunctive relief granted. The respondents are enjoined from attempting to arrange or representing any housing, medical, or financial decisions for Mr. Miller without his express written consent. A no-contact order issues for Ms. Victoria Miller for 90 days absent counsel-to-counsel communication. The court awards fees and costs to the petitioner and refers the matter of the forged instrument to the county attorney for review. She let the words stand, then added the sentence that made the room breathe differently. Elder exploitation will not be tolerated. I stood because my legs told me to, and spoke so it would go in the transcript as more than a nod. Cảm ơn không phải chỉ cho tôi mà cho những người da khác. The judge inclined her head, as if to say she'd heard every word, even if she couldn't translate it herself. Outside microphones waited like open mouths. Benjamin lifted a paw and said no statements today. The law spoke, we let it echo. Across the plaza, a VFW cap bobbed in a small knot of men who nodded once when our eyes met. My phone buzzed again. David, another message I wasn't ready to read, and then a new text from Stephen the journalist with a single line that bent the path of the afternoon. The county attorney just opened a criminal inquiry on the POA attempt. Are you ready to make this about more than your house? A year turns louder when you've earned it. On Thanksgiving afternoon, my new house, a one-story place with a porch deep enough for rain, smelled like sage and butter and a little victory. The court orders had become routine lines on paper. The criminal referral had ripened into probation and restitution agreements. And the foundation we stood up in the heat of scandal now had a name stamped on the door, the Miller Fund for Dignity in Aging. If you called our number, a person answered. If you needed a lawyer, we found one. If you were afraid of your own family, we taught you the language the law understands. In the office off my kitchen, a corkboard held more proof than any speech, a map with colored pins where our hotline lit up a list of elders who sat across from volunteer attorneys and said no. Out loud for the first time, a stack of thank you cards written in hard, deliberate script. We ran 3 workshops a month at the VFW and the Legion on basic estate tools, how to read a POA, when to say not yet, and how to document your life, so a lie can't sit in your chair and answer for you. Before dinner, I added a 4th workshop for the spring financial self-defense for widows and widowers. Me at the podium, not as a cautionary tale, but as a man with a clipboard and a plan. Emily arrived early with a pecan pie and a steadiness that didn't flinch anymore. After the hearings, I changed my will. I told her first privately at the kitchen table where honest things belong. A portion of my estate goes to you, I said, and the remainder endows the fund so no one like me has to choose between slints and exile. She ran her thumb along the rim of her mug and nodded through tears that didn't ask for attention. Thank you for not making me pay for what other people did. I answered the only way that felt true. You paid enough learning where the exits are. David knocked as the light went gold through the live oaks. He's been in therapy all year, sometimes twice a week, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone. He doesn't ask for absolution, he asks for more work. I gave him a hug at the door because men who do the work should be met with a door that opens. You can bring the rolls to the table, I said, and he smiled the way boys do when they are given a task that says you belong. We've met for coffee every other Saturday in a diner that smells like bacon and detergent, and he never once asked me to sweep the past into a neat pile. Tonight, as we set plates, he caught my eye. Thank you for not letting me move back until I learned how to stand up. I set the carving knife down. Loving you meant not rescuing you. He nodded a small bow a son gives a father when words finally match actions. Before we ate, I took the letter from my desk and stood by the window. It's not long. Linda, I wrote the world learned more about us than I ever wanted. I chose to protect the part of you that raised our children and held my hand and laughed in kitchens. The rest stays in the ground where it can't be sold. I folded the page and slid it into the cedar box with the ring I wear on a chain when the house is quiet. Some debts are paid by silence that protects the living. We sat at the table, me at the head, Emily on my right, David on my left, a chair left empty because grief should be named, not banished. It didn't haunt anything tonight. It held a napkin and for a moment my hand. I carved the turkey with a knife that had been sharpened against more than steel. When I raised my glass, I felt the year stack neatly behind the words. They thought my life was over, I said. Then smiled and touched the switch plate by my shoulder. I just flipped the switch. I said it again softly in the language that brought me the first time to this country's hard promises. Hong idoi toida tat. After dessert, the porch filled with the sound of neighbors who waved without pity. The VFW commander texted a photo from a workshop across town. 3 elders holding new folders like passports. The hotline pinged once and the volunteer on duty wrote back with a thumbs up I didn't need to see to believe. Inside the News reran a clip from the gala last year. The camera caught me mid-sentence with the timestamp behind my shoulder like a clock that chose my side. When the dishes were stacked and the house smelled like cinnamon and soap, I stood in the doorway and let the quiet do its work. If you live long enough, you learn what justice can do and what it can't. It can put a fence around your name. It can teach people to keep their hands off what isn't theirs. It can make room for apology. It cannot turn back a clock or unbreak a vow, but it can build a table where a man sits at the head of his own life and invites the future in. Tomorrow we'll field more calls, print more brochures, teach one more person how to hold a pen without shaking. Tonight I turn off the lights in a house that knows who it belongs to, and let the dark settle like an old friend who finally understands the rules. If Richard's fight for dignity, family, truth, and lawful revenge struck a chord, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter of real-life drama and hard-won justice. And share this video with someone who needs proof that age is not surrender. Tell us in the comments where you stand. Have you seen care used as control, and what did it take to reclaim your voice? Your stories help others find the courage to document, to speak up, and to choose the lawful path that turns paper into protection. Now the mic is yours. In a betrayal inside the family, is public exposure a fair road to justice, or should forgiveness come first?